Today, we are starting with 180. And before we ask for a bill brief, there were a couple of testimonies that were shown to me that they were submitted via email. They are not on my list, but we will allow the testimonies to come in. We have 3 proponents. We have 5 opponents. And so to allow equal time, it's not quite equal. We will give 3 minutes for the first 3 opponents, and we will give 2 minutes for each of the others on 5. That gives them 10 minutes. That gives 9 minutes for the proponents.
Madam Chair, do we have those? Do we have those testimonies then? Do we, the committee, have those testimonies?
You do not.
And how will we have those testimonies?
She's going to resend them. They submitted them today. So let's begin with a bill brief from Jenna. We have a very full hour, 50 minutes technically. Thank you, Jenna.
Madam Chair, thank you. Senate Bill 180 would establish the Women's Bill of Rights, and it creates a new section of law. Subsection A would establish definitions of rules of statutory construction to use when applying an individual's biological sex to state laws or rules and regulations. Paragraph 1 defines sex as an individual's biological sex at birth, either male or female. Then female is defined as an individual whose biological reproductive system is designed to produce an ova. And a male is an individual whose biological reproductive system is designed to fertilize an ova. Paragraph 4 defines mother as a female parent and father as a male parent. And paragraphs 5 and 6 set out the rules that with respect to biological sex, equal does not mean identical, and separate accommodations are not necessarily unequal. Subsection B would set out the standard of judicial review for state laws and rules and regulations that distinguish between the sexes, and it would be the intermediate scrutiny. The bill describes intermediate scrutiny as allowing laws to distinguish between sexes where those distinctions are substantially related to an important governmental interest, and the bill sets out the distinctions related to athletics, prisons, domestic violence shelters, and locker rooms, among others, are substantially related to an important governmental interest of protecting the health, safety, and privacy of individuals in those circumstances. And your law school lesson of the day, intermediate scrutiny is a standard of review, and that's a test that courts use to determine a law's constitutionality. And intermediate, just like it sounds, it's the middle one between a rational basis and strict scrutiny. And the Supreme Court of the United States already uses intermediate scrutiny in sex and discrimination cases that arise out of the Equal Protection Clause, as well as some First Amendment challenges. And the U.S. Supreme Court would define that, strict scrutiny as furthering an important governmental interest and must do so by means that are substantially related to that interest, so similar to how the bill does. And subsection E would require any state agency, school district, school that collects vital statistics for certain reasons to identify each individual who is part of the collected data as either male or female at birth. And with that, I'll be happy to answer questions about the bill.
Quick questions for Jenna. Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jenna, in that letter E, then, so that would mean any school district or state agency when so all forms would have to, any kind of forms that have parents or anyone fills out currently would have to reflect whether it's male or female on any form. Is this correct?
Yes, those would be the 2 options.
Thank you.
Jenna, does that mean if options are given, those are the 2 options, not that they require an option be given?
I think that options would have to be given because it says shall identify each individual who is part of the collected data as either male or female at birth. So I think it would, if you're collecting that demographic data, you would have to collect it on sex.
Thank you. Committee, we're going to begin with our first proponent, Riley Gaines, NCAA swimmer. Thank you for being here.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Riley Gaines, and I'm here today as a spokeswoman for Independent Women's Voice to urge you to pass Senate Bill 180, the Kansas Women's Bill of Rights. IWV is an organization that fights for women and their loved ones by advocating for policy solutions that enhance freedom, opportunities, and well-being, and that is exactly what this bill does. Prior to joining IWV, I was a member of the University of Kentucky's women's swim and dive team, where I was a 12-time NCAA All-American. In March of last year, my teammates and I were forced to compete against a biological male named Leah Thomas. Thomas was allowed to compete in the women's division after competing as a member of University of Pennsylvania's men's swim team for 3 years, where at best was ranked 462nd in the men's category. We watched in dismay as Thomas swam to a national title in the 500 freestyle, beating out the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers in the country, including Olympians and American record holders. The next day, Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle, where we tied. We ended up going the exact same time, down to the 100th of a second. But that is not all. In addition to being forced to give up our awards, our titles, and our opportunities, we, as female swimmers, were forced to share a locker room with Thomas, who is a 6'4", 22-year-old biological male equipped with and exposing male genitalia. Let me be clear about this. We were not forewarned about this arrangement. We were not asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent as women. Not so long ago, a decision by a university to allow such discriminatory behavior would have been understood as an obvious violation of Title IX, which is, of course, the 1972 law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in education, including collegiate athletics. But today, unelected bureaucrats want to redefine sex and equate it to gender identity. Under this rewording, colleges and universities would be required to allow anyone who identifies as a woman to compete in women's sports and undress in women changing spaces. This is literally the opposite of what Title IX was enacted to do. What can states do to prevent unelected bureaucrats and judges from unlawfully turning statutes intended to protect women into statutes that discriminate against women? They can, of course, start by passing the Women's Bill of Rights to preserve the integrity of statutes passed to protect women and to protect your legislative prerogatives. Senate Bill 180 does not change any existing laws. It merely establishes a legal definition of sex-based terms, so we are all speaking a common language when it comes to the implementation of laws that are already on the books. Senate Bill 180 is a declaration that words matter and that biology matters and that science matters and that when it comes to privacy and safety, separating the sexes is not only constitutional, it's common sense. Senate Bill 180 won't stop this legislature from passing laws to accommodate trans-identified individuals, but it will prevent bureaucrats and judges from erasing women's statutory rights. So I urge you guys to pass Senate Bill 180, and I thank you for listening today.
Thank you for staying within the time limit, and there will be questions at the end.
Of course. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, we have Jennifer Braceras from Independent Women's Law Center. Is she on? Please unmute yourself, Jennifer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for having me today. Distinguished members of the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee, I'm Jennifer Braceras, Director of Independent Women's Law Center, the legal advocacy arm of Independent Women's Forum and Independent Women's Voice. I'm here to urge you to pass SB 180, the Kansas Women's Bill of Rights. At IW, we understand that while men and women are legally equal, we are not the same. Males and females must be given equal opportunities, but our institutions must not be required to integrate males and females in settings such as prisons, athletic teams, or domestic violence shelters where differences in male and female biology matter. This is consistent with longstanding legal precedent, which requires equal treatment of similarly situated men and women, but allows differentiation between the sexes when privacy, safety, or equal opportunity are at stake, or whenever sex differentiation is substantially related to an important government interest. This, of course, is common sense. Unfortunately, however, this basic premise is threatened today in two distinct ways. First, it is threatened by activists who want to redefine common sex-based words, such as female, male, man, and woman, in a manner that separates sex from biology. Second, it is threatened by those who think that when it comes to sex, separate is inherently unequal. The first threat the redefinition of sex-based words, has the potential to rewrite thousands of state and federal laws that use words like woman, man, male, and female. Decoupling these words from biology changes the meaning of all of these laws already on the books, opening up women's spaces and opportunities to biological men who identify as women or girls. The second threat is equally dangerous but much broader, as it threatens the very existence of single-sex spaces altogether. For decades, some advocates have, with mixed success, urged judges to evaluate sex classifications with the same strict scrutiny that they evaluate racial classifications. These advocates want courts to hold that separating the sexes is almost always illegal, as it is in the race context. But of course, you know that race and sex are different. If these activists prevail, single-sex prisons and domestic violence shelters, as well as athletic teams and sororities and fraternities at public schools, won't just be open to trans-identified biological males. They will cease to exist at all. WBOR addresses these twin threats by codifying the long-standing legal precedents established by the United States Supreme Court, along with the original public meaning of words.
Jennifer, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We gave everybody 3 minutes. Thank you so much for your testimony. We do have your written testimony, and there may be questions later.
Sure.
Next, let's welcome Lauren Adams-Bone from Women's Liberation Front, and again on WebEx. Do we have her available, Dusty?
Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I am testifying on behalf of Women's Liberation Front, which is a feminist nonprofit dedicated to protecting the rights of women and girls. And we do urge you to vote for Senate Bill 180. Recognition of sex is foundational to ensuring the equal access to public life. I will just dive right into something just in consideration of the time. Stumbling around words by requiring the use of things like transgender female, transgender girl or woman when debating public policy puts us at a disadvantage, because we end up stumbling around finding ourselves arguing that a certain type of female should be separated from other females, which places us as using the language of discrimination, of the bad kind of discrimination, instead of just arguing about the separation of men and women in legitimate circumstances. Wolf is representing 4 incarcerated women in California challenging its self-ID law in the prisons. Many men who are serving long sentences for violent crimes have been transferred already. Hundreds more have requested transfer. According to the state, 1/3 of them are sex offenders. One of our plaintiffs was groped by one of these men, and he rubbed his penis on her. She filed a grievance asking to be housed away from male offenders for this reason. And in the prison's response, they described her, the perpetrator, as a transgender woman with a penis. They said that she feared assault from a transgender woman with a penis. Despite several back and forth, the state has never acknowledged that this is a biological male. Crystal is not legally required to pretend he is female, but the state postures as if she is harming him by doing so. In one of their briefs, they referred to her as willfully misgendering this transgender woman, who has done this to other women reportedly as well. There's been forcible rapes, there's been pregnancies, 2 pregnancies in New Jersey to start out with. There's horrifying reports on the ground, media blackouts, because these women can't speak for themselves. And it's absurd for them to have to say that these are female anything, women, girls. And it is devastating to women like Crystal to hear men who rape or sexually assault them referred to as female. And this needs to preserve vital statistics as well. Without properly tracking criminal statistics by sex instead of gender identity, Biden's Bureau of Prison would not have learned this year that transgender status in men's correctional facilities is correlated with perpetration, heightened risk of perpetration of sexual assault against other men. And this is a new thing that they've learned by tracking data over the years. And they also wouldn't have learned that 48% of trans identified men who identify as transgender women, in the federal system, 48% are sex offenders. And this is
Lauren,
defined
thank
by
you so much for your testimony.
Yes,
I'm
thank
afraid our
you.
3 minutes is up. It goes very
I understand.
quickly. There
Thank
may
you.
be questions later if you stay on. And now I'd like to invite Taryn, I hope I'm saying that right, Taryn Jones, to come to the microphone.
Hi, committee members. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Taryn Jones, and I am the lobbyist for Equality Kansas and a lifelong Kansan. I am here to testify in opposition of SB 180. SB 180 talks about how there's differences in biological sexes between men and women and how men are stronger and taller. I find that incredibly offensive. I find that, like, sorry, in this bill and bills like it, there's this idea of a level playing field. But the truth is there can never be a level playing field. There can never be an equal playing field. My cousin is 6 feet tall. She's a cisgender female. Should she not be allowed to play on a women's basketball team because she has an advantage? I also wanted to mention someone earlier talked about Leah Thomas and swimming. Leah Thomas, her freshman year before she was on HRT, was 6th in men's swimming. Once she started HRT, she was 400th in men's swimming. When she got to have enough HRT and was able to play on the women's team, she obviously won. But I just wanted to make a point that that is misleading. I want to also talk about how SB 180 creates an erasure for intersex individuals. Planned Parenthood defines intersex as a general term used for a variety of situations in which a person born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit in boxes of male or female. I know it's convenient for the sponsors of this bill to act like there are only 2 sexes, but scientifically that is not true. According to Amnesty International experts, 2% of the roughly 2% of the population are intersex. So,
I'm sorry, we're out of time.
okay, no worries.
Thank you so much for coming up. Next, we have Reverend Caroline Dean from Kansas Interfaith Action.
Thank you for your time today. My name is Reverend Caroline Dean. I'm a pastor in the Kansas-Oklahoma Conference of the United Church of Christ, and I'm also here on behalf of KIFA, Kansas Interfaith Action, a multi-faith advocacy organization that partners with Christian denominations and Jewish and Muslim Kansans. As a Christian, a pastor, and a leader in my community, as a woman and a mother, I urge you to oppose SB 180. I believe that members of the transgender community are unique individuals created in the image of God. This bill is a part of an ongoing legislative effort to target transgender communities, including the sports bill and gender-affirming healthcare bill. Numerous pastors and colleagues across the state submitted testimony against these bills because we oppose the victimization of the trans community. Someone transitioning to become a woman does not threaten me or take away any of my rights as a woman. There's no professional opportunity that I lose, no spaces I wouldn't be willing to share with a trans woman. The irony of this Women's Bill of Rights is that it doesn't actually enumerate any rights. It weaponizes the rhetoric of rights to erase protections for transgender people. I can name some rights that women need: the right to pay equity, the right to be free from gendered violence and sexual discrimination, the right to childcare and healthcare and bodily autonomy. None of these rights are in this so-called Women's Bill of Rights. As a female pastor, I've been in places where I was unwelcome. I've carved out paths on my own. I'm here to serve and to shine my gifts and to make the world a better place, as I'm sure you are as well. Please allow our trans friends, our neighbors, our youth to be a full part of our community, to share their gifts and to thrive. And instead of spending time debating who goes to the bathroom where. Members of the committee, women don't need to have our rights. We do need to have our rights protected, but we don't want to have our rights weaponized as an attack against trans people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Next, we welcome Liz Hamer. Am I saying that right, Liz? Yes.
Good morning, Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee members. I'm a suburban soccer mom from Goddard, Kansas. You may know me from my time doing advocacy with either Glisten, Kansas or Equality, Kansas. I'm not representing either of those organizations today, but I am here to ask you to oppose SB 180. Upon the first reading, it was clear to me that whoever wrote the bill on that national website has little understanding of our human biology, or at least less than I received through high school biology 2 and college biology in the late 90s. The binary language of the bill, dictating that there are only two sexes, male and female, is completely biologically inaccurate and erases the existence of intersex people. Intersex people like my friend Leslie Jones. Leslie submitted written testimony but could not be here today to speak for his own experience, so I please ask you to read his testimony. Leslie was assigned female at birth based on his genitalia, but has genetic mosaicism. So he never felt like he was a girl. By his mid-30s, his body started transitioning itself. Leslie now sports a full beard, uses he, him pronouns because his body now fully aligns, or more closely aligns, with who he always knew he was, despite who he was told he was in childhood. He is not an anomaly in our science. Intersex people exist. You'll also find that you have this in front of you. This is from Robert Schrock. I will email you all his written testimony on biology, but this is from the Kansas School Naturalist at Emporia State University and his biology on intersex. So think about it for a minute. Nothing about humans is binary. There are way more than two options for eye color, hair color, skin color, shape, personality, sense of humor. Every characteristic that makes us diverse as humans has an infinite number of expressions. So why then would one of the most important things about us as humans be binary? The answer is it's not. Biological sex is not binary, and it's incredibly harmful and dangerous to support legislation that says it is.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Finally, we have Tammy Quayle.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tammy Quayle. I'm a resident of Wichita, Kansas, and my husband and I have 3 college-age children. I'm testifying in opposition to Senate Bill 180. Senate Bill 180 attempts to codify into law a gender binary due to, as it states, the vulnerability of women due to men. But this bill does nothing to actually address those harms. What this bill is intending to do is to marginalize or even legally erase an even more vulnerable group, transgender and non-binary people. Our oldest child came out as transgender when they were 19. After they came out, my husband and I wholeheartedly supported our child. We educated ourselves on the medical and scientific variances in gender and biology, and were humbled by all we did not know. We helped them begin their transition by arranging care at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Eventually, with the help of these doctors and the courts, our child was able to legally change their name as well as their gender marker on their driver's licenses and other legal documentations. I have seen firsthand how achieving the right to a legal gender recognition is crucial for transgender people to live behind a life of marginalization and enjoy a life of privacy and dignity. I ask that you seek to understand the science behind this. Trust the biologists, the endocrinologists, the professionals. There is no binary. Transgender and non-binary people's genders are real and valid, and it's actually grounded in science. My husband and I are lifelong Catholics. We sent our kids to Catholic schools. We graduated from Catholic schools as well. Golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. That is simple. That is easy. We can do that. When I researched this bill, I found out that this bill has very similar language, almost identical to ones that are trying to be passed in North Dakota and Mississippi. This is copy and pasted. This is coming from outside of Kansas. This isn't for Kansas at all. We are trying to marginalize a group of very vulnerable people, and I ask that you vote no on SB 180.
Thank you. Committee, we have a very short period of time for questions, and it can be from proponents or opponents. Senator Holster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have questions for Riley as well as Jennifer initially. If you would, please, Riley. And you have to restate your name, or does she need to restate her name?
Sorry, thank you. This is Riley Gaines. Thanks.
My question is this: all of the information that you covered as far as the situation that happened, that was not in Kansas, correct? That was in Kentucky?
It was actually the meet that allowed it to occur was at Georgia Tech in Georgia. But yes, I swam for the University of Kentucky.
Okay. And did you petition the NCAA regarding some of the issues?
I did. When I first asked the NCAA about the locker room incident in particular at the meet on the pool deck, they told me they got around this by making the locker rooms unisex, which would have meant that any man, not even a self-identifying woman, could have walked into our changing space and seen us fully exposed, which, might I add, swimming locker rooms are not a place of modesty. So that was their rationale behind it. After that, I sent lots of letters to the NCAA with no answer, and so actually a couple weeks ago, I went down to San Antonio to the NCAA convention, to where I garnered a petition of nearly 10,000 signatures in just a matter of days, and presented the NCAA with a legal demand letter that said if they don't stop discriminating on the basis of sex, there will be legal action. And also, I want to add to the piece about Leah Thomas being ranked 6th, that is simply not true. Leah Thomas didn't qualify for NCAAs when Leah was identifying as Will. Leah might have gotten 6th at a dual meet or within the conference meet, but nationally, Leah was never ranked 6th.
Thank you. And Senator Holster, we have several other senators, so we'll have one question at a time until we get to 5 after.
Follow up
So-
for her very quickly. When did your organization write this legislation?
I wrote the legislation. I'm not sure when the legislation was wrote, but in regards to my testimony, that is something that I constructed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Steffen.
Thank you. Ms. Gaines, you're the person of choice here. Appreciate you being here, and your commitment to your sport is incredible. I understand my daughter played basketball at Yale, and I appreciate the time, the commitment, the expertise you develop, and I'm grateful for your being here.
Thank you so much.
Help me understand how far this really has permeated into the athletic culture. Are they, to have those men in the locker rooms with you all is just incredible. Does that even travel down into when you all are on the road traveling? Are they putting this Leah in hotel rooms with the girl swimmers?
I'm not exactly sure entirely in Leah's instance, but I did have a young diver at a D3 university to which they are terrified of using their name for fear of being retaliated against or called transphobic, which is the case we're seeing among so many athletes. So I won't say her name, but she actually is dealing with this. The D3 university has the male diver on their team who now is identifying as a woman, taking opportunities, and at their training trip, this person did room with the women, of course, changed in the locker room with women. And when this woman said something to her coach about it, the coach said, sorry, there's nothing I can do, and actually accused her of being the one to commit sexual harassment when she was uncomfortable sharing this space with a biological male.
Thank you, Senator Steffen. Senator Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This would be for actually any one of the opponents. I know a number of women who are very uncomfortable being in restrooms with biological males. And I know that there are a lot of people trying to accommodate for the various versions of sexes or genders. And I've heard various numbers in the media. Could somebody please inform me exactly how many different genders there are?
I'm a pastor, so I'm not a scientist.
Okay.
But I can tell you that the suicide rates among transgender youth and transgender individuals.
That's not the question.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
many genders are there?
There are as many genders as there are beautiful creations in the world. There's a lot of different expressions.
And how do you
of that.
identify gender?
I identify gender as a beautiful part of humanity and creation, so that we are created in kind of unique multiplicity. There's so many layers to who I am as a woman and as a pastor and as a person.
But in the
And
Bible,
I don't think-
what does the Bible say?
The Bible, I'm preaching on the Transfiguration this Sunday. Jesus is transfigured into a multiple being, human and divine, a person beyond humanity. And I believe that God created us in God's image.
Thank you,
And
Senator
Thank you.
Thompson. Senator Petty.
If I may I, this is Jennifer Braceras, may I attempt to address the question?
We will let Senator Petty ask her question, and then we can come back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so actually, this is a question for Jennifer. So Jennifer, I was actually looking on your website, and so you do support the needs of lesbian and bisexual women, is that correct?
I think you're talking about me, my Wolf's website, the feminist organization. Is that
Yes, that's
what you're
correct.
referring to? Yeah, that's me.
Is that Lauren? Sorry.
Yes.
I'm
Yep,
sorry,
Lauren.
Lauren. So Lauren, you do support the needs of lesbian and bisexual women?
Absolutely, and they're disproportionately represented in the prison population, so they're disproportionately the ones who are being sexually assaulted and harassed, including trans-identified females, of which there are also disproportionately represented. So women who identify as transgender men or who identify as non-binary. In our lawsuit, we had declarants, we have witnesses from them who describe witnessing or experiencing sexual harassment and sexual assault on the basis of their sex and not on their gender identity.
And is your organization, along with Independent Women's Voices and Independent Women's Law Center, so are you the primary, or you started the Sign the Women's Bill of Rights? Is this correct, the website?
Yeah, and we put it together. I got involved in this issue personally after learning about these issues of just the practical on the ground stuff of experiences that women were having. And so I got together with Wolf and joined up as a volunteer and later was hired and met Jennifer. Our organizations have a couple areas of overlap, and this is one of them. But our perspective of it at Wolf comes from the point of view of coming from marginalized women, and board of directors is composed, like half of them are lesbians, and that is one of the groups that faces the greatest harmful effects of these policies because
Lauren, thank you very much, and our time is up. Thank you, Senator Petty. And I'm going to give an opportunity for Jennifer to respond to Senator Thompson's question.
Yes, you asked how many genders there are. There are only two sexes. That's a biological fact. People with DSD conditions or intersex people are not in a third sex. They are a variation on the sex binary. Essentially, they are the exception that proves the rule. And intersex people should, of course, be accommodated under law on a case-by-case basis based on their medical condition. This bill has nothing to do with that. In fact, this bill doesn't change current law at all. All this bill does is prevent unelected judges and bureaucrats from changing the meaning of laws that are already on the books. And it leaves to you,
Thank
the
you very much.
legislature, to determine.
Jennifer, can you
what
hear me?
protections.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off right there. This concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 180. I'm sorry? No, I gave till 5 after, and we're past that. This concludes the hearing on 180, and now we will move to the hearing on SB 5. Jenna?
thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Senate Bill 5 is an act that prohibits the prescription of medications intended to induce an abortion via telemedicine. And this bill would amend KSA 42-215, and that's part of the Telemedicine Act. The existing law prohibits the delivery of any abortion procedure via telemedicine. And subsection B would set out the term abortion procedure to include the prescribing of drugs intended to induce an abortion. And new subsection C states that provisions of this section shall not be altered or suspended during any state of disaster emergency declared by the governor pursuant to KSA 48924 and amendments thereto. And section 2 amends KSA 48925, and that would add into the list of the things that the governor could not do during a state of disaster emergency. This would be on page 3 of paragraph 4. It would state that the governor cannot alter or modify the provisions of KSA 42-215, prohibiting abortions via telemedicine. And so it just it sort of bans the governor from amending the provisions of this in both places. And I'll be happy to answer questions on the bill.
Committee, any quick questions for Jenna? Senator Petty.
Jenna, a couple questions. So in KSA 40-2215, is that the only thing that's addressed in there? When you say it, that it prohibits the powers of the governor during an emergency? Isn't that where you refer to that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I was wondering if just the prohibiting abortion by telemedicine is in that statute of 40-2.
Oh, I mean, it's not currently in the statute, but the bill would add that to the statute. In both the Telemedicine Act and then as well as the correlating amendment in the Kansas Emergency Management Act.
And then secondly, does anything that we do here supersede federal law?
Generally, no. The Supremacy Clause would prohibit state actions from trumping federal laws.
So if the federal laws are already in place about access to a medication to induce abortion via telemedicine, if that's already in place, then this has no, it has no.
I mean, ultimately, the court would have to decide, but there's also state law in place.
So it could lead to court, it just leads to lawsuits, costly lawsuits for Kansas citizens. Correct. Thank you.
Senator Holster, did you have a quick question for Jenna?
I was just going to petition the chair that we be able to ask our questions. I feel like we're trying to cram through a lot of things in a very short time, and these are very serious matters. So like I said, we have the professionals here, or the experts here. I thought in regard to both of these bills, it would be good for us to be able to ask our questions. Thank you.
And now we will move to our first proponent. We only have 2 testimonies today, and we'll allow time for questions. And the first is Senator Mark Steffen.
Thank you, Mark Steffen, Senate District 34. I really don't have basically anything to add over what the reviser said. This is clearly to clarify what was insinuated in the telemedicine bill. It just makes it perfectly clear that you can't prescribe chemical abortion medications via telemedicine. And from there, you know, we don't want the governor under an emergency declaration changing that law. And so we make it perfectly clear that the governor cannot change that law. It's a very straightforward, simple bill, and that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
And next we have Carol Donis. Am I pronouncing that correctly? And she's virtual. Is she on, Dusty? Okay.
Morning.
Carol, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, hey, thank you very much, Honorable Senator Gossage and all committee members. I appreciate being here with you this morning. I am a precinct committee woman in Johnson County. I noticed when I entered the Capitol the other day, there was a sign which basically references "We the People." This sign it's interesting that it correlates with the Kansas Constitution that was founded on January 29th, 1861. Ethically speaking, the question I would like you to consider is a human fetus, is it a human fetus or is it a human being? Most academic philosophers argue that the fetus should be considered part of the human species as it shares our genetic code, and if unimpeded in its development, will grow and mature into an adult human being. It has a heartbeat, so it is alive and it is growing. If you are unsure, then consider that now, due to the advanced medical technology, if a pregnant woman loses her child or delivers their baby, even as early as 22 weeks, Many organs are formed, and the baby has the ability to survive outside the womb, thanks to the advances of medical technologies. If the fetus is a person, then it should be accorded the same rights and privileges as enjoyed by adult human beings. Abortion is morally as serious as terminating the life of an adult human being. As both an adult and a fetus, they are both people. Allowing pregnant mothers to be able to do a telehealth appointment concerning an innocent child should not be a matter of convenience, especially when one is making serious life decisions for an unborn child. The fact that we have the internet in our society should not be used when deciding if a child should be born or unborn. A human life is sacred. It should not be treated as though you are buying a new television for your home via the internet. If a mother does not want a baby, then give it up for adoption. It's as simple as that. Please vote your conscience, and according to your moral code, please say yes to SB 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any questions for either of our conferees?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I had called yesterday and asked to give oral testimony in favor of SB 5.
Okay, do you know when you called? This is Danola, and she takes all the phone calls.
I'm Bridget Smith. I called you between 11:30 and 12 yesterday. We have you down for written only.
Under the circumstances, since we have no other opponent testimony, please come forward. We'll make an exception.
Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is Bridget Smith, and I'm the Executive Director for Insight Women's Center in Lawrence, Kansas. I've served in my current position for 10 years, and our center provides a safe space for women making a pregnancy decision without manipulation or ill intent. While we don't perform or refer for abortions, we educate women about the different options for their pregnancy, including information about the different types of abortion. Additionally, we offer emotional support for women after they've experienced an abortion. Through the conversations we've had with these women who've taken the abortion pill, I can confidently state that telemedicine appointments, prescribing abortion drugs without a physical exam is not health care. Within the last month, we've had 2 women visit our center after they have taken the abortion pill. One of those women was 4 days out from taking the pill, so the process of the abortion was not even complete. And while I was sitting there visiting with her, I asked if she would go ahead and educate me on telemedicine because I didn't know much about that. And so she told me that she searched online. She found a website called Aid Access, and she scheduled an appointment with a physician in the UK. That physician prescribed the medical abortion pills from India. Those pills were sent from India. It took 3 weeks to go through customs to get to her in Lawrence, Kansas. And she had very little instruction about the process of that abortion pill, and that's why she was at our center that day. As you can clearly see, there are multiple ways this process could go wrong, jeopardizing the health and welfare of women. And there is nothing about this process that should be considered health care. This story clearly shows why SB 5 is essential. And I kindly encourage you today to vote yes for SB 5. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for your testimony, and I misunderstood. I thought you said you were an opponent, and you are a proponent.
Yes, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. That's all right. I just misunderstood you. Committee, it is 20 minutes after. We have a couple of minutes for questions. Are there any questions for any of them? Oh, yes. Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this can either be for Bridget or it could be for Senator Stefan. What are the complications of a woman taking abortion pills to terminate a pregnancy if they have not received a physical exam?
I know that you received a written testimony by Kim Grubbs, and I would encourage you to look through that. I'm not a medical professional. I know some of the things that our nurses have shared with our patients, but if you look at Kim Grubbs' written testimony, all of it's factual information that is cited, so I would just encourage you to look there.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
And final, yes.
Throw in my 2 cents worth real quick. Without a physical exam or with a physical exam, you have the opportunity to assess a person for bleeding abnormalities. And you throw these pills in and you can certainly have a woman bleed to death as a result.
Senator Holster with the last question.
I actually want to use my question for somebody from the previous bill, and my question is for Liz. Can you tell us the question was asked?
I'm sorry, that hearing was closed. And now, committee, this concludes the hearing on SB 5. I would like to speak to the committee. We did not have as you know, bills came in very late this year compared to other years. And that's one of the reasons why things feel a little bit rushed, because we actually only have 2 days next week to finish up our hearings and final action on bills, giving us very little time. We have 2 other bills for next week. So I would like to have your thoughts on us meeting on Friday to be able to make sure that we get final action. Otherwise, I could be a dictator, but I would like to have your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm sorry, what was your question? Whether or not we're
Question
working
was,
Friday?
yes, I'm thinking we're going to need Friday. I know other committees are using Friday. A lot of people don't like to come in on Friday. Yes.
Yeah, I would rather add an hour at some point in the afternoon. I'd rather do anything but that. I have business responsibilities.
I know you do. We all do. The concern is that we will have to go then very quickly on final action on Tuesday if we don't meet on Friday. Afternoons now, we're going to be spending longer times in Senate session, and those afternoons could be 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I've got something on Friday morning I can't avoid. And it's right at 8 o'clock, anticipating, pro forma and everything. So unfortunately, I'm in a bad situation. I too would be agreeable to having a late afternoon meeting next week, just to be able to accommodate what you need to do.
This is why I asked. So committee, what we will do is I will look at and speak with Senate leadership as to an idea of how long we think that we may go. But please come prepared for final action on bills on Tuesday of next week. And if I could find another time, I will certainly let you all know. Thank you, and committee, we are adjourned.